Today we delve deep into the mysteries of Street Fighter. We're focusing on one of the most iconic characters in the game, Ken Masters. From his fiery fighting style to his luxurious lifestyle, Ken is a fascinating figure with plenty of secrets to uncover. Join us as we explore the unknown depths of Ken's past, from his enigmatic training with his sensei to his complicated relationship with his rivals and allies. We'll also be analyzing his signature moves and uncovering the hidden facts that you might not know of. Without further ado, let me welcome you to the Street Fighterverse. His father, a wealthy hotel tycoon owner, told Ken at the age of 12 that his son had to learn discipline or else he would become a spoiled brat and try to inherit their family fortune. In order to do so, the elder masters sent Ken to train under his best friend, the mysterious karate master, Gouken. At first, Ken was very hesitant to learn from Gouken, wanting to go back to the United States, but later began to respect his master. He even enjoyed the company of Gouken's adopted son, Ryu. Ryu and Ken would later become best friends and each other's principal rivals. In Street Fighter Alpha, Ken fought and won the premier US martial arts tournament that had been previously won by Charlie Nash, as well as meeting a very attractive girl named Eliza, who became his girlfriend. After winning the US martial arts tournament, the heroic story that Ryu defeated the Emperor of Muay Thai reaches his ears. He asks Ken what it means to be a true fighter. He wonders if he should use the same fist he used to defeat Sagat, or the other one Akuma uses to murder people. Ken sees that Ryu has gone back to his usual bad habit of overthinking things, and fights him as an attempt to wake him up. After defeating Ryu, Ken realizes he has been deeply troubled since his last victory over Sagat. He reminds Ryu to keep fighting in order to find the answer, and gives him his red hairband, that whenever he feels lost, he should use it as a reminder of their fight, and to keep fighting to find the answer. Ryu happily takes the headband, and they both go their separate ways. Ken returns home and, with Eliza's support, begins training harder, knowing even with his recent feelings that Ryu is always stronger than he looks. Ken begins to wonder about his own life. Along the road to proving himself again, he encounters Karin, who tells him she has followed his career and is trying to best her rival Sakura. To prove she is superior, Ken advises her it's good to have a rival, not for supremacy, but to keep on training harder and focusing. Going off to meet up with Sakura, they have a friendly match and Ken finally realizes that Ryu has the right idea all along. Both he and Sakura begin to travel to find Ryu, but their path crosses with that of Shadowloo's dictator, M. Bison. Ken confronts him, but he is easily defeated and placed under Bison's hypnosis. Bison then uses brainwashed Ken to lure Ryu out of hiding. Once Ryu shows up, Bison makes Ken fight him. Ryu wins and manages to release Ken of Bison's mind control. Ryu then proceeds to fight Bison, but loses and, just like Ken before him, is turned into a slave of Bison's psycho power. Sagat appears and, enraged by Bison's actions, engages Ryu in an attempt to break Bison's mental grip on him. Ken, now free and aided by Sakura, attacks Bison. This intervention, along with Sagat's presence, makes Ryu come to his senses. Recovered, Ryu takes on Bison once more. Bison senses Ryu's dark power and attempts to manipulate Ryu's mind once again. At his friend's urging, Ryu resists and defeats Bison with a powerful Hadouken. Ken is happy to see his old friend again. With the promise of a new duel, the two part their ways. In Street Fighter 2, Ken receives a letter from Ryu where he describes his consistent immersion in daily training, which rekindled Ken's fighting spirit. Realizing that he's been slacking on his own training, Ken goes back into the world of fighting. After the events of Street Fighter 2, Ken is married to Eliza, something he had apparently vowed only to do after winning a decisive victory against Ryu. However, it is unknown if the two fought during the tournament, or if Ken actually won, if they even did. No details have been stated. In Street Fighter 2 Complete File, it states that he lost to Ryu and continued his training. In Super Street Fighter 4, when a new tournament is announced, Ken isn't sure whether to compete, as Eliza is now far along in pregnancy, and he doesn't want to leave her. Sensing his inner conflict, Eliza assures him that she'll be fine, and that the baby isn't due for a while yet, so he should go meet up with Ryu and tell him she says hi. Ken enters, and in the absence of gas stations near the location for the final, he parks his SUV in a convenient spot, calls Eliza to check on her, and continues the rest of the way on foot. Over the course of the tournament, he encounters his self-appointed rival, Rufus. Although the results of that match are unknown, after the tournament, it is discovered that Gouken is still alive, and Ken and Ryu pursues him as he leaves. Ken is upset that Gouken has not said anything to them, but Gouken counters that they no longer need a master. Ken and Ryu head home on foot, and Rufus passes by them on his motorbike, calling them losers. Soon, however, Rufus's bike runs out of gas, and Ken and Ryu reach the SUV. Ken offers Rufus and his girlfriend Candy a lift, but Rufus refuses. Soon afterwards, their son is born, and they name him Mel. In Street Fighter V, Ken, Eliza, and Mel are invited into a party hosted by Karin. During the party, Ken reflects on the various sparring matches between him and Ryu. The family gets lost on the way to the party and encounters Birdie, who thinks they are trespassing, resulting in a fight with Ken. Karin arrives and offers Ken a pre-meal fight as an apology for Birdie attacking him, which Ken accepts. Afterwards, he and Eliza wonder about why Ryu isn't at the party. In A Shadow Falls, on the main story, Ken came to visit Ryu, who was in the middle of meditating after getting defeated in a sparring match with Ken. Ryu tells him that he will join them when his training is complete. Later, Ken arrives with the rest of the fighters called by Karin to the Kansuki estate, where they plan their first infiltration of the Shadowloo base. Ken, Chun-Li, and Cammy travel to Brazil to search for the first missing chess piece, held by Lara Matsuda. While there, he saves Sean from Fang, but he is then attacked by his older sister Laura, who mistakes him for an enemy. After the fight, Sean sorts out the misunderstanding by indicating the unconscious Shadowloo soldiers. Laura then decides to join them, but on the condition that Ken add Matsuda Jujitsu into his selection of online karate classes, which he agrees to. Chun-Li then leaves to assist Karin in the group's first infiltration. Ken remains with Laura, and the duo fend off more Shadowloo soldiers, with Ken taking out 3 with a single Shinryuken. Ken reunites with Ryu just before the group begins the final assault against Shadowloo. After Bison's final defeat at Ryu's hands and Shadowloo's destruction, Ken finds Ryu alone and meditating, and decides to have another friendly sparring match to see if Ryu has found his true answer. Ryu manages to defeat Ken, but drops his red headband. Ken hands it back to him, figuring he might still need it. The two are later seen sharing a friendly fist bump. In Street Fighter III, a Brazilian teenager named Sean had been pestering him to become his student, and Ken reluctantly accepted, beginning to train him. Maintaining a home and raising a child has strained his relationship with Ryu. Ken gets in touch with Ryu and invites him to a Japanese hot spring inn. Ken also brings Sean along, but decides to do last-minute shopping for Eliza before flying to Japan. In reality, Ken purposely left Sean alone to see how he'll do in a street fight. Ken then entered the World Warrior tournament. He fought Sean in the tournament and won against him. However, he drops out upon realizing Ryu was defeated by Oro. Ken begins to train his son Mel in rudimentary fighting techniques. He also told Sean to go find Ryu and challenge him, giving him some free time with Eliza. He learned that Ryu had sought him out and traveled all the way to New York from Oakland for their long-awaited rematch. Tossing some friendly jabs at each other, both have a good fight, ultimately won by Ryu. Since then, Ken has continued to train Sean and Mel, handle his family and business, and keep up with his old friend Ryu. In Sean's ending, Ken wakes up Sean, who was beaten unconscious after being knocked down by his opponent in the first round. In Ken's ending, he wins his 3rd straight US Martial Arts tournament, which is a new record, and offers the trophy to Sean, who turns the offer down, wanting to earn it for himself. In the Street Fighter VI comic, in this chapter, Ken, the acting chairman of board at Masters Foundation, discusses the inclusion of cryptocurrency and microinsurance projects in Neishal's communication infrastructure business. His colleagues express concerns about rushed economic aid projects and advise him to consult his father. However, Ken asserts his authority and refuses to involve his father. Jackson, his advisor, tries to reason with him. Meanwhile, Ken's son, Mel, expresses frustration with his father's lack of consideration. Luke, escorting Mel, interrupts their conversation. Ken is informed about a special emergency passageway by Kalima, a secretary. They meet JP, the venue owner, who presents Ken with a sacred cerulean cloth. The King of Neishal invites Ken to participate in the tournament, despite his reluctance. Later, Ken consults Jackson, and they're interrupted by a roadblock of protesters. Shots are fired, injuring Ken and Jackson. Their car explodes, killing Jackson and the driver. Ken escapes and is rescued by Tsujimoto and a woman. In Chapter 2, Ken wakes up in an apartment and sees Tsujimoto. Ken asks who he is and tries to get up, but he's still recovering from the gunshot wound. Chun-Li then shows up, commenting that Ken shouldn't move yet. Ken asks what happened to Jackson, and she says that they couldn't get to him in time, and Ken is saddened to hear of his death. After Chun-Li explains to Ken about the video transmitted by Amnesia and that he's in custody of Interpol, Ken gets angry and shouts that he had nothing to do with this, but Chun-Li knocks him back and points a gun at him, telling him to calm down. She's aware that Ken is being framed and that they're currently looking for a way to prove his innocence. However, because the whole world saw the video, he wouldn't be safe, and so he can't leave. Ken then asks what happened to Mel, and Chun-Li is shocked that his son is here. Ken begs that he needs to call his son. However, she leaves the room and makes a call, making Ken frustrated. Ken asks Sujimoto if he could help with the gunshot wound and he complies, only for Ken to knock him out to find the culprits behind this and to clear his name. In Chapter 3, Ken wakes up from a nightmare and tries to leave without being spotted. While avoiding military personnel, he stumbles upon a man running away and accidentally trips over a kid. Suddenly, an explosion occurs, and Ken checks on the child's well-being. However, upon recognizing Ken from the news, the kid runs away. Spotting the explosion, 2 personnel notice Ken and he is forced to flee. Luke catches up with Ken and they are joined by JP. Ken questions how JP was able to find him, and JP explains that he utilized the surveillance network system developed with Ken's funding. Ken further inquires how JP knew he would find the abandoned building, but JP interrupts, stating that Ken's chapter was destined to conclude there. JP reveals his plan and Ken attempts to attack him, but to no avail. JP employs his drone to show Ken a captured Mel, tied up and blindfolded. Mel expresses his faith in his father's goodness, but the transmission is cut short. Ken threatens JP, but JP reveals a drone hidden under Mel's chair and hands Ken his dropped phone. The phone displays a map with drone icons and a detonation button. JP explains that if Ken pushes the button to save Mel, another drone will explode elsewhere, potentially causing harm to others. Ken initially believes JP is bluffing, but one of the drone icons triggers an explosion, proving JP's seriousness. JP gives Ken additional motivation by showing Mel once again, this time with a timer counting down from 3 minutes. Ken pleads with JP to stop, but JP uses his cane to decrease the timer and urges Ken to make the right choice. Overwhelmed, Ken decides to save Mel, but loses contact with his son. Luke demands Ken surrender, but before they can act, a woman grabs Ken and they jump through a window, landing in a river. In Chapter 4, Ken acknowledges to Kalima that she was right about him not considering the well-being of people and the country. However, he accuses her of being involved in the setup and video clip, angering her. Kalima insists that she is not like JP, and clarifies that the opposition had nothing to do with the recent events or the masked attackers. She reveals that many of her comrades were wrongly arrested due to the video and bombings. Kalima explains that JP's true intentions are to use the tournament as a means to launder money and steal funds through online betting. She warns Ken that JP will use Mel to draw him out. Kalima wanted Ken to understand the plight of people and emphasized that only the citizens can solve the country's problems. Ken resolves to save his son and confront JP. At the arena, Ken finds Mel's room empty and encounters a fighter named Boris. Stealing his clothes to disguise himself, Ken confronts JP, and Luke, JP's associate, tries to intervene. Ken attacks Luke, injuring his eye. Luke accuses Ken of teaming up with terrorists and reveals his personal vendetta against Ken for his father's death. Despite his injuries, Ken finds strength in his son's voice and fights back. Ken defeats Luke but chooses to surrender when offered the chance to see Mel again. He is subsequently arrested. After being released, Ken walks the streets in a depressed state but maintains his fighting spirit as he raises his fist, signifying his determination to continue.
Mel Masters is a dynamic character in the Street Fighter series, known as the son of Ken and Eliza Masters, as well as the nephew of Julia, Guile's wife. In Street Fighter 4, The Ties That Bind, Eliza, Ken's wife, is captured by Sea Viper to lure Ryu. Ken embarks on a daring rescue mission, overcoming formidable obstacles to save her. After a fierce battle, Ken emerges victorious and reunites with Eliza, relieved and overjoyed. In that pivotal moment, Eliza reveals their life-changing news. She is pregnant. The revelation fills their hearts with a mix of excitement, responsibility, and love as they anticipate the arrival of their child. United by their shared victory and the promise of a growing family, Ken and Eliza embark on a new chapter, fortified by their unbreakable bond and the determination to protect and nurture their future generation. Amidst the triumph of his Super Street Fighter 4 victory, Ken's ending reveals the birth of his son, marking marking the dawn of a new legacy. In the Street Fighter V prologue, the Master's family, including Mel, attends a party hosted by Garin. Though mostly asleep, Mel awakens during a fierce battle between his father Ken and Garin. During the events of A Shadow Falls, Mel crosses paths with his father Ken, who entrusts him with the task of protecting his mother while he embarks on a mission to Brazil alongside Chun-Li and Cammy. In Street Fighter III series, a young and determined Mel Masters, just 3 years old, makes a memorable appearance in Ken's ending. Inspired by his father's legacy, Mel expresses his heartfelt desire to follow in Ken's footsteps and train alongside him. In a touching moment, Ken encourages his young son's enthusiasm and instructs him to give it his all. However, due to his tender age and limited physical reach, Mel's valiant effort to strike his father with all his might ends up connecting with a comical yet unexpected target. The light-hearted mishap adds a touch of humor to the scene, showcasing the unique bond between father and son, and what is his importance in Street Fighter VI. For that, let's delve into the new Street Fighter comics. As Mel enters his teenage years, the advice from his father Ken weighs heavily on his shoulders. Ken urges him to explore the world and broaden his horizons, but Mel finds solace and joy in the company of his friends and the world of gaming. Frustration and a sense of resentment starts to simmer within Mel as he struggles to comprehend why his father insists on pushing him towards a different path. In the intriguing first chapter of Days of the Eclipse, Mel awakens at an airport and meets his guide, Luke, on their way to Nashal. Mel disagrees with Luke's view that the world is expanding, feeling it is actually shrinking since they reached Nashal in just one day. He corrects Luke's mistaken belief about Nigeria's location. In a phone call with his father Ken, Mel expresses frustration about his father's lack of concern for his own desires, leading to tension. Luke teases Mel about having a girlfriend. Mel reminds Luke of their upcoming ceremony and dismisses the idea of befriending newcomers. Mel shares his experience encountering wolves with his father in the mountains of Alaska, contradicting Luke's wolf impression. Luke gives Mel a fruit and a pocket knife, symbolizing the importance of mastering outdoor skills. In Chapter 2, Luke informs Mel that their arrival is imminent. However, Mel's frustration is evident as he responds with a sigh. Upon reaching the Nashal martial arts fighting tournament arena, Mel realizes that his father has not responded to his message. Worried, he attempts to call him, but his efforts are interrupted by a message from the hacktivist group known as Amnesia. The message accuses Ken Masters of being associated with terrorism, shocking Mel to the core. In light of the disturbing revelation, Luke swiftly takes charge, prioritizing Mel's safety. They make their own way to the city where Luke engages in a conversation with his superior, discussing the current situation. With orders from his boss, Luke is instructed to return to headquarters, and Mel is to accompany him. Meanwhile, Men finds himself captivated by a video detailing the allegations against his father. The weight of the accusations and the uncertainty surrounding his father's innocence loom over him, leaving him in a state of unease and confusion. In Chapter 3, Mel expresses his concern for his father's innocence to Luke, who unfortunately needs to leave. Luke shares his regret about not being able to play the monster game with Mel. Mel attempts to return Luke's knife, but Luke insists he keeps it as they part ways. As they exit the building, Luke receives a notification that Mel has accepted his friend request. Suddenly, Mel is kidnapped by a mysterious figure wearing an amnesia mask. JP shows Ken his son, bound to a chair and blindfolded. JP informs Ken that if he triggers the drones with his phone, Mel will be saved but others may be harmed. Alternatively, if Ken refuses to cooperate, the drone underneath Mel's chair will explode. Determined to save his son, Ken manages to halt the timer but loses all communication with Mel. In Chapter 4, Mel, who is still tied up in a chair and blindfolded, starts moving and is able to fall out of the chair and notices Luke's pocket knife. He's able to grab it and escapes. At the arena, Mel is able to find Luke and tries to talk to him. However, he sees his dad in the ring and Luke ends up fighting him. Mel uses a broken drone and he's able to talk to his dad. Mel is disheartened to see his dad being arrested and thinks that the world that he lost him to is too big for him. Sometime later at Ken's office, Mel stares at the window while some employee is moving boxes. The employee tells Mel that they need to lock the room, and the two leave. Mel thinks to himself that wherever his dad is, he can see him.
As stated by fandom, Violent Ken is obsessed with power, as all his winning quotes seem to focus on this obsession. His personality is somewhat similar to certain other characters, such as Evil Ryu and DiCaprio. It is great to point out that the source of Violent Ken's power is based on Psycho Power. This is based on the mind control Bison had over Ken. A common misconception on the source of Violent Ken's power is that it originates from the Orochi power, a fictional power energy from SNK's The King of Fighters series. This is probably due to the purple flames in Violent Ken's Shoryuken, similar to those under the influence of the Riot of the Blood, and the skull pillar at the end of Shimbu Mesatsu. That is also an element shown in some Orochi power users like Rugal, Mature, and Vice. His aggressive and wild behavior is also reminiscent of Orochi Iori, his SNK counterpart in the SNK vs. Capcom series. Evil Ryu's source of power is said to come from the Satsui no Hado, a dark energy-based force described as taking the spirit to kill the opponent to the extreme and transforming it into a physical power. It is important to point out that although Ryu never showed any signs of the Satsui no Hado's influence after the events of the Street Fighter IV series, several games present a hypothetical version of Ryu who has embraced the power, willingly or not, becoming Evil Ryu in the process. Furthermore, other media often depicts him temporarily succumbing to the Satsui no Hado. Violent Ken's design and backstory were heavily influenced by Ken's appearance in Street Fighter II, the animated movie, as stated before, where he was brainwashed by M. Bison. He was designed to be the contrast of how he would be normally, lusting for power just like Evil Ryu, and having no empathy for others, even for the ones he cared about. During Street Fighter II, the animated movie, Ken is captured, brainwashed, and sent to fight against Ryu, keeping them preoccupied, while Bison tracks down Guile. When Ryu undoes the brainwashing, Bison tries to use his psycho power on Ken before turning his attention to Ryu, who defends himself against Bison, initially with little success. Fortunately, Ken uses his master teachings to mend his body and joins the fight. This is very important to point out. In Street Fighter II manga, this is the first appearance of a brainwashed, violent Ken, predating Street Fighter II, the animated movie. However, this incarnation of Ken is not under the control of the psycho power. What is Violent Ken's story in Street Fighter and in SNK vs. Capcom, SVC Chaos? In Ultra Street Fighter II, the final challengers, M. Bison takes control of Ken with psycho power and turns him into Violent Ken. After mowing through numerous opponents in the tournament, he confronts M. Bison and defeats him. After beating him, Ken regains control over himself as he leaves on his boat. He ponders to himself that he'll never go to the same path as Ryu, but hopes to see him at the end of it. In one of Violent Ken's most amazing crossovers, SNK vs. Capcom SVC Chaos, Ken was being controlled by Shadowloo with psycho power. He easily fell to its influence due to his mind getting weaker when he began feeling jealous and impatient to become a better fighter like Ryu, who was surpassing him. Now full of hatred, the psycho power enhanced Violent Ken seeks his rival to determine which of them is the strongest, with his flames gaining a purple color. However, when he saw the red headband he gave to Ryu, he returned to his normal self. Regular Ken, while fighting against his violent form in the SVC Chaos, wonders if deep down he desires this. Violent Ken is fought as a sub-boss in the game, with the 7th fight being against either him or Orochi Iori. Both Ken and Violent Ken's ending in the game is almost the same. However, in the beginning of Violent Ken's ending, after the last battle, the evil power that was plaguing Ken lost its hold on him, returning him back to normal. However, after returning home, Ken no longer remembers what happened to him, or what he had done during the duration of his arcade mode story, and then the rest of Ken's ending plays from there. Violent Ken fights using the unnamed Ansatsuken art. Due to his state, Violent Ken is a more ruthless, aggressive, valiant, daring, fearless, and cutthroat version of Ken. His Ansatsuken style uses purple flames instead of regular ones in his Shoryuken, which is a feature of Akuma's Hadokens and Shoryukens from the Marvel vs. Capcom series, and a pillar of deathly energy appears at the end of his Exceed move, which is a feature of Rugal's DMs in The King of Fighters. He seems to speak with a calm, sinister voice, while combining it with incoherent screams similar to Orochi Iori.
One of the most intriguing mysteries surrounding Ken Masters is his nationality. Though born in the United States, Ken is actually 1/4 Anglo-American and 3/4 Japanese. This is justified as his father was also likely born in the States, but is half Japanese. A misconception seen from Western Street Fighter fan is that Ken's Japanese heritage was a retcon in order to dilute his American side. In reality, Ken always had a Japanese descent, as evident by the fact his name is spelled in kanji in the Street Fighter's flyer, and Ken being listed as Japanese alongside Ryu and Retsu. In Street Fighter II, it states that he's born and raised in Japan, and that he's 1/4 American, since his maternal grandfather is American. He then moved to the United States to continue his training, and that United States is his mother's homeland. Manabu Takemura confirms that Ken represents a typical young man who likes American culture and wants to become an American, And in All About Street Fighter 3, the characters, the first sentence under the family section says, Nihon Sushin, which translated means birthplace. Another amazing fact you might not know about Ken Masters is based on his birth date. Ken's birthday is a special day for him as it falls on February 14th, a day which is celebrated globally as St. Valentine's Day. Interestingly, he also shares his birthday with two other Capcom characters, Gil's right-hand lady, Colin, and Natsu Ayuhara, from the Rival School series. If you look closely in this next hidden egg, there's something lurking in the backgrounds. Ken's stage in the popular fighting game Street Fighter Alpha 2 is well known for featuring cameo appearances by various characters from other Capcom franchises. These include characters from the Darkstalker series and Captain Commando, the titular protagonist from the classic arcade game of the same name. The inclusion of these characters in Ken's stage adds a layer of depth and complexity to the game, as players get the opportunity to see familiar faces from the other popular franchises. It also creates a sense of nostalgia for players who may have grown up playing these games, as they are able to recognize and interact with these characters they already know and love. Moreover, these cameo appearances also serve as a testament to the creative vision and collaborative efforts of Capcom as game developers. By bringing together characters from different franchises and continuity within their gaming universe, which helps to solidify their position as a leading game developer in the industry. Talking about his character stages, if there's one thing we love about Ken Master's Street Fighter 2 stage, is its iconic theme. Fans of Street Fighter 2 may have noticed that Ken's theme bears some resemblance to the song Mighty Wings from the iconic 1986 film Top Gun. This similarity has been pointed out by many fans, and even Street Fighter 2 composer Yoko Shimomura acknowledged it in an interview. However, Shimomura clarified that while she had watched the movie before composing Ken's theme, she didn't deliberately set out to create a song that sounded like Mighty Wings. Interestingly, it has been reported that Ken's theme was originally intended to be used as Guile's themes instead. This makes sense, given that Guile is a member of the US Air Force, just like the characters in Top Gun. However, at some point during the game's development, the decision was made to switch the themes, and Ken's theme ended up being used for the popular Street Fighter character instead. Regardless of the origins of Ken's theme, it has become a beloved part of the Street Fighter franchise, with fans all over the world humming the catchy tune as they play the game. Its connection to Top Gun only adds to its appeal, as fans of the film can appreciate the nod to the iconic soundtrack. Also, when selecting Ken as an opponent in Street Fighter 2, a location marker for Detroit, Michigan appears on the map, suggesting that he is from or has some connection to that area. And this hidden fact about Ken, this is something that has been most likely missed. In Street Fighter 3 Second Impact, players controlling Ken would hear a familiar line if they managed to defeat Sean, a young fighter who idolizes Ken. Ken would say to Sean, "You must defeat Ryu to stand a chance." This quote is a clear reference to Ryu's infamous and widely mistranslated win quote from Street Fighter 2, in which he says, "You must defeat my Shoryuken, Shenlong, in order to stand a chance." Fans of the Street Fighter franchise have long debated the true meaning of Ryu's quote, with some believing that he was referencing a hidden, unbeatable boss character named Shenlong. Ken's use of this quote in Street Fighter 2 Second Impact is a clever nod to the series' history and a playful reference to the enduring mystery surrounding Ryu's original quote. It also highlights the relationship between Ken and Ryu, who are both iconic characters in the franchise and have a long-standing rivalry. By using Ryu's quote, Ken is essentially passing on the wisdom he has gained from his own battles with Ryu, and encouraging Sean to continue training and improving if he wants to stand a chance against Ryu, and by extension, the other top fighters in the Street Fighter world. One of the most intriguing questions about Ken Master has to be the ordeal with his blonde hair. It's fascinating to learn that Ken, one of the most recognizable characters in the Street Fighter franchise, was actually born with brunette hair. According to legend, Ken's decision to dye his hair blonde was an act of rebellion against his parents, and it is safe to say that he liked the look so much that he stuck with it. Interestingly, Ken's son, Mel, also has blonde hair, but it seems he got that trait from his mother. It's possible that Ken's hair dyeing episode had deeper implications in his life, including his decision to train with Gouken. After all, his father, Mr. Masters, may have seen the act of rebellion as a sign that Ken needed to be taught discipline and humility. And as we know, training with Gouken had a profound impact on Ken's life, both in terms of his martial arts skills and his personal growth. Ken's decision to maintain his blonde hair could also be seen as a reflection of his personality. Blonde hair has a bright and bubbly connotation, much like Ken's infectious and energetic personality. It also serves to differentiate him from his sparring partner, Ryu, whose darker hair reflects his more serious and introspective nature. Overall, It's fascinating to see how Ken's hair color not only adds to his iconic appearance, but also provides insight into his character and personal journey. Let's start with Ken Masters. Ken is known for his quick and powerful moves, as well as his rivalry with fellow character Ryu. While Ken is a fan favorite, there are both pros and cons to using him in gameplay. One of the biggest pros of using Ken is his speed. Ken's moves are fast and can easily catch opponents off guard. This allows players to quickly close in on their opponents and land powerful strikes. Ken's speed also allows him to easily evade attacks, making him a difficult target for his opponents to hit. Another pro of using Ken is his powerful special moves. Ken's Shoryuken and Hadouken are two of the most iconic moves in the Street Fighter series, and for good reason. They deal a significant amount of damage and can be difficult for opponents to block or evade. Ken also has a variety of other special moves that can be used in different situations, providing players with a lot of options in battle. However, Ken also has some cons. One of the biggest downsides to using Ken is that his moves are very predictable. Ken's moves have been in the game for a long time, and many players are familiar with them. This can make it easy for opponents to predict what Ken is going to do and counter accordingly. Another con of using Ken is that he is not well-rounded as some other characters. While Ken excels in speed and power, he lacks other important traits such as range and defense. This can make it difficult for players to deal with certain opponents or situations. Let's talk about Akuma now. Akuma is definitely a character that stands out. He is known for his speed, power, and deadly special moves, which has made him a favorite among many players. One of the biggest advantages of using Akuma is his speed. He is incredibly quick and agile, which allows players to easily outmaneuver their opponents. This makes it easy to land quick strikes and also allows players to evade their opponent's attacks. This makes him a formidable opponent in the game. Another advantage of using Akuma is his powerful special moves. He has a wide variety of special moves, including his iconic Raging Demon, which deals massive damage and can be difficult for opponents to block or evade. This gives players a lot of options in battle and allows them to adapt to different situations. However, as much as Akuma has lots of strength, he also has some downsides. One of the biggest downsides to using him is that he is a high-risk, high-reward character. Akuma's moves are incredibly powerful, but they also require precise timing and execution to be effective. This means that players who are not familiar with the character may find themselves making mistakes and taking unnecessary damage. Another downside is that Akuma's moves can be quite predictable. His moves have been in the game for a long time, and many players are familiar with them. This makes it easy for opponents to predict what Akuma is going to do and counter accordingly as well. Lastly, Akuma has a high execution barrier, meaning that many of his moves are difficult to pull off in a match, especially in high-pressure situations. This can make it difficult for players to effectively use him in a match. Now what about Ryu? Well, Ryu is known for his balanced playstyle and emphasis on mastering the basic techniques of fighting. While Ryu is a fan favorite, there are both pros and cons to using him in gameplay. One of the biggest pros of using Ryu is his balance. Ryu is a well-rounded character, with no glaring weaknesses. He has a good mix of speed, power, and range, making him adaptable to a variety of situations. This allows players to play a more defensive style, or a more aggressive style, depending on the match. Another pro of using Ryu is his special moves. Ryu has the iconic Hadouken and Shoryuken moves, which are powerful and can be difficult for opponents to block or evade. These moves also have a variety of properties and can be used in different situations, providing players with a lot of options in battle. However, Ryu also has some cons. One of the biggest downsides to using Ryu is that he may not be as powerful as some other characters. Ryu is balanced, but he may not have the same raw power or speed as other characters, making it harder to finish off opponents. Another con of using Ryu is that his moves are predictable. Ryu's moves have been in the game for a long time. This can make it easy for opponents to predict what Ryu is going to do and counter accordingly also. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Street Fighter and the enigmatic character of Ken Masters. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay up to date on new theories and info. Thank you for watching. This has been your Street Fighter host. Welcome to the center stage. Our new Discord server. There you can talk with us, chat about current events going on in Street Fighter, information, theories, and lore. We'll leave the link in the description box below. We want to thank everyone for tuning in and becoming part of this Street Fighter community. We want to thank you for your positive comments towards our channel because it only habilitates us to grow even more. From the Street Fighterverse crew, we thank you.